we are opening with really our lead mission, right, which is our research. And you know, I'm working with a wonderful team of dedicated people committed to finding solutions to PWS. And so, without further ado, I'd ask the research team to join me here on stage. We're going to have a bit of a town hall. Each of them will present. I'd encourage you to ask questions at the end of each presentation. And I don't think we're at the refreshment break, although not a bad idea, right? There we are.
So you just want to click on the name. So are you?
Yep.
Is Teresa first?
Yep. I'll go. So,
thank you.
So to start off, we're going to start off. Teresa Strong, our director of research programs, is going to talk about our grant program and give you a little perspective on some of the things we funded and what that looks like over time. So, Teresa, if I could, I'll start off with you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see such a great crowd. I'm Teresa Strong. I am mom to Daniel, who is shown there. I am a co-founder of FPWR. So I had a career as a geneticist in an academic setting. And I was working as a postdoc when I got pregnant with twins, one of whom is Daniel with PWS, and his twin brother Christopher does not have PWS. After a few years, managed to meet up with some other families, as Susan said, who were like-minded, that we really could, as an advocacy group, be helping to advance the research, helping to encourage industry involvement in PWS and support academic researchers who were dedicated to PWS and who had lots of experimental questions to ask, but didn't necessarily have the funding to answer those questions. With Alice Furislav and Rachel Tugan and Lauren and others, we founded FPWR now 15 years ago, and it's been amazing to see the growth of the organization and to have all of you be part of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the FPWR grant program, which has been our bread and butter over the last 15 years to build the PWS research community. So you'll see this diagram hopefully a few times over the next couple of days. It really shows research from the discovery stage all the way through drug development and then what we call post-approval, when we have drugs that we can use, like growth hormone that we use in PWS. And FPWR has a number of directed research programs that are filling the gaps along this pathway, and Natalie will be talking about those. I'm going to talk today to lead us off about the grant program. And this program is for innovative research, really anywhere along this pathway, usually in the research and discovery space, but it really can be anywhere. So the goals of this grant program, and we call this an investigator-initiated grant program because this is research that all of the scientists bring to us when they see opportunities, when they see places that we can advance our knowledge of PWS, or if they see new drugs that need to be tested, they develop a proposal and they submit it to us. So this program generally supports early stage, very innovative. We're looking for innovative projects, new ideas about PWS, new ideas about treating PWS. And we select grants from a pool of applicants, and we select them based both on scientific merit, so all the scientists, we have scientists who review and make sure that they're scientifically sound, and we also have parents who review the projects as well to make sure that these are projects that are important to our families. Even if it's good science, if it's not important to our families, then it's not ours to be funding. So we use that collaborative process to select grants that are highly relevant as well as scientifically sound. The goals of this program is to, among other things, to support the best research, but also to expand the number of PWS researchers. So we had our scientific day yesterday, and one of the really nice things was to see was new investigators who hadn't been working in PWS, but who had expertise in behavior or oxytocin or many of the aspects that are important to PWS, now with FPWR funding, are really applying their knowledge to PWS. So we want to draw scientists into the field, we want to support promising young investigators, and then for those researchers who have been in the field and know PWS, we want to give them the opportunity to try out new ideas. So over the last, our first funding was in 2004, and so since then we've supported, actually now it's more than $11 million in research, supporting more than 150 projects in 13 countries. So we take researchers from around the world. We're not necessarily, we're looking for the best research no matter where it's being done. So we've supported research around the globe. And this has led to more than 150 publications. One of the ways that we can tell if our researchers are kind of doing good work is how they publish it, and that's a way for them to get their information out into the scientific community so others can build on that information. So there's been more than 150 publications that have been presented with FPWR funding, and these have really included everything from new insights into how PWS genetics works, to clinical trials, to sort of best practices of clinical care, so really across that entire research spectrum. And it's important that a lot of times what we're doing with our grant program is kind of providing seed funding so that researchers can get additional funding from other sources, like in the U.S., the National Institutes of Health. So our funding has led to at least more than $15 million in funding from those government sources to continue to build that research and continue to build that knowledge. So that's one of the important roles that we play as an advocacy organization. There's been a bunch of new resources that have been developed and new drugs, new candidate drug targets as well. And this is just showing you the kinds of research that we support. Sometimes it's in a dish, studies in a dish. Sometimes it's in animal models, testing drugs, for example, in a mouse model of PWS. And sometimes it's clinical, actually testing or doing studies in our kids with PWS. Most of it is at discovery stage, so kind of early developing new ideas. But we go all the way through supporting some of the early stage clinical trials. The expense of the late stage clinical trials is too much, but we can support those early stage clinical trials, which then maybe industry would become interested in. And across the board, the kinds of research, the areas that we're supporting really matches all of the challenges that our kids face. So what returns on investment we get, obviously I don't want you to read this, but it just shows you some of the publications that have come out this year with FPWR funding. And I'll just highlight a couple of things. Better understanding of the PWS genes and where they're expressed in the brain and why this may cause our kids problems with their endocrine system. Some advanced molecular ways of looking at what are the differences between gene expression in a typical brain versus PWS. Some drug development. Dr. Weverick, who's somewhere in the audience, did a study using the Seleno drug in a PWS mouse, showing how that drug decreased fat mass in that mouse. We've supported studies in straight-up drug development for drugs that are targeting the ghrelin system, which is abnormally high in PWS, and then initial steps towards genetic therapies. So one of the things that we're really interested in is gene activation. So all of our kids have the mom's chromosome 15 intact, but the genes are silent. And so we're looking at ways to turn those genes on. And Dr. Lalande, and this research is now being carried out by Dr. Chamberlain, looked at a way to do that in cells in a dish, in PWS cells in a dish. And Dr. LaSalle and others looked at doing gene replacement, and actually is finding some of the challenges that kind of an approach would require. So it's a lot of laying the path for eventual therapeutic development. So that's just an overview of some of the work that your funds, if your fundraising, have gone to support, and the kinds of things that we're moving towards.
Does anyone have any questions for Teresa? We'll be able to ask questions again in the, at the end of this, but I wanted to give you the opportunity because we're going to be covering a lot in a short period of time. So next up is our Director of Translational Research, Natalie. She's going to talk about our strategic plan, our clinical trials consortium, and our animal models that we're developing to try and help move the science along. So, Natalie?
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to see you here. And I think it was really great, Susan, when you talk about, the title of this conference, together we can and we will. And I hope also that at the end we can say we are. That's really the goal of the research team and, the entire community, including you as well as the academic, all the scientists, the clinicians, and the different organizations. So I'm a neuroscientist by background. I've been working for the last more than 10 years in the rare disease fields, mainly in neuromuscular disorders, neurodegenerative disorders, in non-profit settings as well as in academic as well as in industry also. And it's really important, like Teresa, I don't really have time to discuss about this, but we have also some video on our website where you can delve into the research strategic plan. But, the first thing that you need to do when you are talking about a rare disease is to understand the mechanism before you can identify a target and then move along the drug. What I call drug is any type of therapy, whether it's, a pharmacological agent or anything else. So that's the first step, and it has been great to see the success of the grant program that Teresa has developed over many years. Now you can see, we have more and more clinical trials, and this is, in part thanks to the foundation that has been laid out, thanks to the grant program. But this is not enough. Understanding, what could be the mechanism underlying the disease is not enough. We need then to move forward, and there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of questions to answer. So we are at this stage, and so in 2016, we developed a 5-year research strategic plan, really to address and asking the questions, what do we know? What are the gaps? What are the challenges? What can we do, us as a foundation with limited resources and limited, human resources as well? To really address this question, because we know that in the drug development is really a long process. In general, it takes 10 to 15 years. There are stories, fortunately, where, in 5 years you can develop a product, but it takes a long time. It costs a lot of money. And also there is, and this is also a general comment, there is 90% of failures. So that, keeping in mind when you have therapeutic development, we want to address that. How can we do better? And this is why we develop a 5-year research strategic plan that is really constructed around the therapeutic approaches that are now possible for PWS, which are genetic-based therapies. You've heard about gene activation, but also, gene replacement, and also pharmacotherapies. You can see a number of clinical trials that are undergoing right now using small molecules to address different symptoms of PWS, including hyperphagia. So that's what the plan is around. It's made of different, and unfortunately I don't have time to discuss about all the different programs that we have, but it's really programs that, in addition to the grant programs, is going to address really the gaps and the challenges that we need to address before we can move a drug along this therapeutic development. So we have a series of programs under the discovery stage, critical knowledge, as well as some tools, designing better cellular models. That when we identify a target, whether we have a small molecules or anything else, we need to test it in the animals before we can go through the human. So at the that's what is called the preclinical stage. So to test in animals, we've developed a preclinical animal network, and I also encourage you to look at our website. We have a really nice video from last year explaining what is the work that we are doing. Basically, is looking at all the mouse models. For the moment, is really focusing on mice. Is really at the mouse models that are currently available, and we have a really nice group of international experts in behavior, in PWS, in genetics, to really answer the question of, first of all, what are the animal models? Do we need to develop new animal models? And we do that, but also to validate these animal models. We are going to do an extensive phenotypic characterizations of these animal models for all the different symptoms that are characteristic of PWS. And the end goal is really to know what are these models good for, for which symptoms, and also this is going to be useful for the entire community, but also to develop a drug preclinical screening platform. So we have a lot of industry that comes to us and say, we have this drug that we think could be very useful for PWS. That would be a good way to screen that drug through this platform. We are constructing a number of other animal models, larger animal models, like pig, and we are thinking about primate also. And in terms of addressing challenges at the clinical trials, I'm going to talk about the PWS Clinical Trial Consortium. We are also developing, and Jessica is going to talk about the Human Global Registry. We are also about to launch a PWS clinical site network across the US and Canada that will help and increase the number of sites to do clinical research, but also to do clinical trials, hoping that these clinical sites will be closer to your home. So we want to increase the geographic coverage so we can increase the number of patients that are enrolled in clinical trials. Because as you know, PWS is a rare disorder. One of the major challenges when you want to do clinical trials in rare disease is the number of patients, which is great. We have a number of clinical trials that are increasing, but a major roadblock would be not to have enough patients to test the drugs on. And then we have also, this strategic plan is really trying to balance like longer term projects that we had all the projects that I've been talking about with more short-term goal, how we can improve, of course we hope to develop a therapy that can address the root cause of the disease. That's what we are hoping, and that's where, directed towards too. But in the meantime, we need to improve the quality of life, not only of the individuals with PWS, your child, but also improve the quality of life of the caregivers, including the parents. So this is what the clinical care program, and Lauren is going to talk about, an aspect of this that has to do with the mental health. So, that's the major goal of this strategic plan, is to de-risk drug development, invest in all therapeutics, and balance short-term and long-term goals. And now I would like to spend a few minutes talking about one particular program, which is the PWS Clinical Trial Consortium. That program has been launched in 2015, so 3 years ago. We organized a workshop that was dedicated to discuss about what are the challenges in clinical trials for PWS. And it was a nice workshop that was organized in Washington. We had 8 people from the FDA, which is great. We have clinicians, not only from the US, but at international level. We have also a number of patient organizations, including PWS USA, also the French Foundation, the International Prader-Willi Syndrome Organization. And so during that workshop, we thought that the best way to address clinical trial challenges, and I'm going to talk about them later, would be really to create a platform, a collaborative platform at the pre-competitive level, which means, including industry, including patient organizations, and including clinicians. Because all of these different stakeholders have a very unique expertise, and we need all this expertise. We need to integrate this expertise. We absolutely need the industry expertise, but we need also the expertise from the patients, and we need the expertise from the clinicians. So this is the main goal of creating this clinical trial consortium. So the mission it's a long mission, but it contains all the right word, is to accelerate, that's the aim, accelerate clinical trials for PWS through the establishment of a collaborative, pre-competitive, and international consortium. It's also very important, we are in the field of rare disease, and FPWR is doing really a good job at really having, international funding for grants, international collaborations all the time. And as I just mentioned, we want to integrate the expertise and the perspective of the different stakeholders, from these different multi-stakeholders, to address multiple challenges, whether it's scientific, technical, clinical, and also the regulatory needs. As you know, the regulatory policies are very different from one country to the other one, and we need to address that. So that's the mission of the consortium. So in terms of the activities, the consortium is really focused on two main goals. One is to support the development of new measures for treatment efficacy in clinical trials. As you know, there are many clinical trials undergoing now that have developed some, mainly molecules to address hyperphagia. How do you measure hyperphagia? If you want to know if the drug is working or not, we need to have a good outcome measure. Until recently, weight was a proxy measure of hyperphagia, but as you know, losing weight is not, is not really only the goal of what we expect from a drug. Is really to address hyperphagia. So how do you measure hyperphagia for example, in kids that are in control environments that are not, that are not overweight? So that's one of the main goals. And the second goal is really to incorporate the voice of caregivers as well as individuals with PWS in the benefit risk assessment of therapeutics in clinical trials. Until now, until very recently, what used to be done is, you would talk with the regulatory agencies or with the industry, you would have some testimonies of the patients or the caregivers about, what is important for them, what are their treatment priorities, what do they expect from the drug. Now, more and more, we are really developing more scientific evidence-based methods, really to document what is the majority of the caregivers thinking, what are, what about treatment priorities, what is important for them, what are the risks they are willing to take, and studies show that it's very different what you think as parents than what the clinicians think the parents are willing to take, or even what the individuals with the disease are willing to take. So that's what we want to do, so is to document all this different information so we can have a really good view of, the perspective of the caregivers and as well as the individuals with PWS. So I'm not going to discuss about any of these, in particular, all these different measures that we are developing or helping others, including academic or industry, to develop. And I would like to point to the session tomorrow morning, multi-stakeholder collaboration, how PWS Clinical Trial Consortium is advancing trials for PWS. This will happen tomorrow morning from 11 to 12:15. And we will have, the different investigators who have developed these different measures. And we'll be able to talk with you more in details about this and how the consortium has helped to develop these measures. So there's, two measures that are being developed by the Vanderbilt, Elizabeth Roof and Elizabeth Dykens, about the food safety zone questionnaires, really try to, capture what are the measures that parents are taking to control the food environment. There is a PWS profile questionnaire, so it's really trying to develop a more global behavioral questionnaire that is really specific to PWS. And then there is, and Bonnie Taylor is going to talk about this, the Montefiore-Einstein rigidity scale that aims really to capture the cognitive and behavior rigidity that is very specific to PWS. And the final one, we will have Sarah Cotter from Livo, who is going to discuss about the PWS anxiety and distress questionnaires, addressing anxiety and distress in PWS that they are developing. And the aim goal is to use these different questionnaires to validate them and to use them in clinical trials. And then as part of the second main focus of this consortium, we have different activities. The first activity was to develop a video on the impact of PWS across the lifespan, because it's so, I mean, and I can myself talk about this when I first came into the PWS field. It's not always obvious to really understand, you know, what is PWS, what are the different challenges. The regulatory agencies have the same problem, you know, so a lot of professionals, whether they come from industry or academia or regulatory agencies, it's not always easy to, you know, to explain, you know, what is the impact of hyperphagia, temper outbursts on the life of the caregivers. So one of the best way we thought we would illustrate this is to develop a video that would discuss about the different challenges of PWS across the lifespan, you know, when they're, so we have 3 families, babies, and then, you know, adolescents, and then adults. The second one, the second topic, we are also measuring what is the impact of PWS on caregiver life, and Lauren will talk tomorrow at the session about that. And so basically, we've published a publication trying to really measure what is the impact of PWS on the caregivers. The third one is to really quantify the caregiver's treatment preferences. You know, what are your treatment, what are the caregivers thinking in terms of treatment priorities, benefit, and risk they are willing to take. So that's also something that we will discuss a little bit more in details. The study is being finished. And the last point is to, and that's something we are starting this year, is really trying to gather some information about what are the patients themselves thinking about treatment priorities. So very briefly, I think it's really a platform that starts, you know, when you start a platform like this, a collaborative, pre-competitive, it takes some years, you know, to build trust between the different stakeholders that are usually not used to talk to each other. So I think we are going to see after 3 years a really nice collaboration between the different stakeholders, whether it's industry with clinicians, as well as the patient organizations. We had 4 industry members, sorry, don't take my words, I forgot. At the beginning, you know, that were part of the consortium. This year we have 7 industry members that are part of the consortium. We are going to organize, every year we organize an annual conference about the consortium, and we have 7 additional new industry members who are interested by the consortium. So I think that's also a measure of the success of this consortium. We are starting to publish, which is great because it's available now to not only, you know, the consortium members, but to the entire scientific community. And what is great also is this time we have requested a meeting with the FDA, and we've been granted a meeting with the FDA, and this will happen in November. And so we will discuss with the FDA all the activities that we've been doing in the consortium, so we can exchange information, not only increase their awareness, but also discuss about the future of this consortium, how we can be impactful. And these are the members. I don't have time to name their names, but it's really thanks to all these members that we are able to move on with the consortium. Thank you.
So next, Lauren is going to come up and talk about what we're doing in the area of mental health.
Except for nobody will be able to see me, except for through this hole right here, so you can see me later. Okay, this is not my slide. Wait a minute. Okay. Escape? I don't see escape.
It starts again.
Just hit the arrow? Or... Oh, very fancy. Okay. Okay. So I'm Lauren Schwartz-Roth, and I'm a member of the FPWR research team, focused on behavior and mental health programs. I'm also a psychologist. I work at the University of Washington in Seattle. But most importantly, I'm the mom to a young lady with Prader-Willi syndrome, Emma, who's 19. That's a picture of her right there, playing soccer last year. Whoops. Okay. So I'm going to talk about Prader-Willi mental health research, 5 reasons to have hope for the future. So in 2015, that isn't the slide I was expecting, so I'm just going to talk about it. Anyways, in 2015, we did a mental health research strategy workshop where we gathered scientists, researchers from all over the world to talk about developing a plan for Prader-Willi research, particularly focusing on mental health and behavioral issues. We ended up publishing a paper following that where we highlighted the top 10 recommendations that came from the program. And we presented a poster yesterday that highlighted the progress that's been made just in the last 3 years in several of the recommendations. So today I'm going to talk about some of those areas. The poster's over there. You guys can all take a look at it. It's also available on our website. That summarizes the research in the last few years. Bottom line is a lot has been done, which is pretty exciting, because a few years ago there was not a whole lot in the area of mental health and behavior research in Prader-Willi syndrome. So I'm really excited to see the progress. So top 5 reasons to have hope. First one is mindfulness. You've probably all heard about mindfulness. It's been all the rave the last 5 to 10 years. So recently a researcher, Dr. Nirbhay Singh, did a study looking at using a specific mindfulness protocol that he modified for use for people with developmental disabilities to see if he could help teach people with Prader-Willi to use this strategy to improve behavior. And what they found was not only were these folks able to be compliant with the protocol, but they also found significant reduction in temper outbursts and aggression, which can be problematic for some people with Prader-Willi syndrome. So since that time, Dr. Stuart Eimfeld and Dr. Rice have kind of jumped on this idea at the University of Sydney in Australia, and they are currently recruiting for a larger study measuring the impact of mindfulness, taking Dr. Nirbhay's protocol and modifying it somewhat, and looking at the impact of using mindfulness on temper outbursts and anxiety in teens and young adults with Prader-Willi syndrome. The exciting thing is that the intervention will be portable, so it'll be virtual, so anybody can use it if it's effective, and the results should be out next summer, so I'm pretty excited about this. Number 2, the second area of research that's seen some great progress in the last few years is in addressing social challenges. As many of you know, you've probably heard that our kids can have some particularly social challenges both when they're young and as they get older. There's a couple great studies that have been done in the last 2 years. Number 1 is the BOSS study, which stands for Building Our Social Skills. And Dr. Dykins and Elizabeth Roof have been conducting this study for the last 2 years, focused on teens and young adults. They developed a specific curriculum to teach these folks with Prader-Willi some specific skills for emotion regulation, social skills, and friendship skills. It was an online group. It was very cool. It was like a group Skype. They met a couple times a week, the same group, kids together, for 10 weeks. And Elizabeth will be presenting the data, hot off the press from this study, tomorrow. You can see the session at the bottom there. So we'll get to hear. I haven't even heard the results, so it'll be brand new to all of us. So I'm excited to hear about that. The second study was done by Dr. Dimitropoulos and her team at Case Western Reserve, and they're looking at a telehealth intervention for preschool-age children to look at, if you intervene early, can this be helpful in terms of the development of social skills and cognitive skills as well. And we'll also be hearing more about that study tomorrow. And we got a little preview yesterday at Scientific Day, and the results are very promising. So I hope you all will make an effort to see that talk. Numbers 3 and 4 are new treatments for behavioral challenges. So there's a couple in this area that I think show promise. A small study a few years ago showed that vagal nerve stimulation may have effects on behavior in Prader-Willi syndrome, and this study was published. Interestingly, they were originally looking at effects on hyperphagia, but they didn't really see significant effects in that area, but all of the caregivers said after the study that the person with Prader-Willi behavior improved so much that they wanted to keep the project going. So after that, Dr. Holland and his team decided to do a more specific project focused on looking at and monitoring behavior over time with the use of this device. And they're using a transcutaneal vagal nerve stimulator, and I can explain more what that is at a later time, but you strap it to your arm kind of like an iPod, and it gives a little stimulation for about 4 hours a day. And with their study that they've just completed, and again presented some results yesterday at Scientific Day, they found significant improvements in temper outbursts, aggression, social functioning, and temperament. And by temperament, it's sort of personality. They were more flexible. Some of the caregivers said they seemed more chill, so I think that sounds pretty promising. I would like my daughter to be a little more chill sometimes. So I think this study is really interesting and offers hope for potential non-medication interventions for our children in the future. I'm looking forward to more research on this particular device. The second project that I think is also shows promise and was presented during a Scientific Day in a poster is a case study of 20 individuals by Dr. Singh, a different Dr. Singh, with patients taking guanfacine, which is a medication that's already out on the market for attention deficit issues. And he treated 20 of his patients, aged 6 to 26, with this medication, and found decrease in symptoms of agitation, feelings of anger, improved attention, and less skin picking. So he's interested in moving forward to do a more focused clinical trial looking at this area. So future research is warranted on both of these areas to confirm these findings in larger samples. And lastly, time to talk about us, addressing caregiver stress. This is a really important issue that I feel passionate about. Parenting a child with special needs can be really wonderful and can open up a lot of opportunities and friendships and connections, but it can also be very stressful. And the other thing is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. A friend of mine told me this when my daughter was young, and she was right. So parents, we need support and tools to keep us going. So FPWR is very interested in receiving and reviewing proposals over the next year or so for some interventions for parents of children with Prader-Willi syndrome. And I'm very interested in interventions that would be easy and manageable for us to do. We don't need a big, complex program. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. So these are some, and the other thing is, and we heard a study about this yesterday, and this is true in lots of areas, whether you have a child with special needs or not, if parents are doing better, our kids do better too. So improving our health, mental and physical, helps our children as well. So these are some of the things that I'm excited about, and I'm happy to talk further about any of these projects over the next few days. Just feel free to come find me at the conference. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So next up, Jessica's going to talk to us a little bit about the registry and natural history study, so we can learn more about that.
What am I doing?
Escape.
Where is escape? It's an Apple. I don't know where escape is. I'm a PC person. End show?
No.
No. There, I don't see escape. I'm a PC person.
Neither one of us do. I don't feel bad.
Okay, so it was end show. Okay. Got it. Okay, so thank you. Like John said, my name is Jessica Bohanowicz. I'm the Associate Director of Research Programs with FPWR. I wear many hats, but one of the things that I manage is the Global PWS Registry. And in light of the conference goals, we can, we are, we will. We've been hearing about what researchers are doing, what clinicians are doing, what drug companies are doing. I'm here to tell you about the your responsibility of the we. So this is the homepage of the registry, just to show you what it looks like. For those of you who are not familiar with the Global PWS Registry, it is basically designed to be a web-based database of all information about everybody in the world with PWS. That's the goal, a central repository database of all of the information, comprehensive database. And there's a couple of goals with that and reasons why that is important. Some of those are that it allows the research community as well as parents and families to better understand the full spectrum of PWS characteristics. So many times, as parents, as caregivers, so many of you are sharing anecdotal information on Facebook, right? But that's anecdotal information. It's not actual quantitative. It doesn't have percentages and statistics. And is that a real observation, or is that a one-off type of observation? So being able to have all of that information in a central database is critically important. A registry also is important in terms of helping to expedite the completion of clinical trials. One of the biggest hurdles of clinical trials, like Natalie mentioned, is recruitment of participants, of families who have people that are eligible and want to participate and know about opportunities. And so think of the registry like a sort of Match.com, whereas if a trial knows what types of people they're looking for, they can come to us with their dating criteria, and we forward that out to all of the families who meet those criteria based upon what information you've put into the registry, and then we're able to match you up faster. And that's all done in a way that we serve as the middleman, so researchers don't contact you directly. They provide us information, which we then forward to participants within the registry, and then it's up to you if you would like to contact them in order to protect your privacy. The registry also helps determine areas of needed research and treatments. So by being able to take anecdotal stories and quantify them, we sometimes, it allows the possibility of picking up something that maybe we didn't realize was going on in PWS, and it opens up oh gosh, that's really a research area question that we need to analyze further. One example that we sort of talk about is seizures in PWS. Is it more prevalent in PWS versus the regular population? Is there a genetic subtype? There's basic information that we would need to know in order to even drive an actual research study into that area. It can also help guide standards of care. There's surveys on medications and dietary supplements, for example, behavioral therapies, and it asks a lot of questions of what's working for you. What have you tried? Diets that you've tried. What's working, what's not working, in order to be able to possibly come up with what are general standards of care that people with PWS are benefiting most from. And all of this is with the overall goal of improving the lives of those affected by PWS and their families. So the general setup of the registry is, like I said, it's a comprehensive battery of web-based surveys. The great thing is that they can be completed individually, so you can log in, log out, you can save drafts. You don't have to sit down and do it all at one time, because obviously everybody's life is very, very busy. Surveys can also be updated as things change over time. So if a medication changes, you can log in, update it. They stopped taking this one, the dose changed. This is why we stopped, etc. Developmental milestones, maybe if you're starting the registry with a 1-month-old, it's really, really quick. But as your infant is growing, you can add information. So these, like I was saying, is a sort of a list of the types of surveys that are in there. We've actually added a couple more with a project that we are just launching. But the other really cool thing about this from your perspective is that any survey that you complete, you get to see the aggregate data for all of the questions that are in that survey. So if you want to know how many people have had a sleep study, go answer the sleep survey, and then you can see how many people have had a sleep study. And the user interface uses branching logic, so most of the surveys have a sort of front end of questions, can be pretty quick, and then anything that you answer yes to. So for example, this is the survey for endocrinology medications. If you say yes, they are taking growth hormone, then it would open up with follow-up questions. And so most of the surveys are built that way with branching logic. So that's sort of a really brief overview of the registry. There's a lot more detail that we can dial down into. Last year, when I was giving this presentation, what we really talked about was the data that's starting to come out of the registry. And If you would like more information about that, there's a video recording of last year's presentation, which has a lot of figures and data and just exciting stuff that was coming out. There's a video recording of that on the FPWR website. We also released these infographics, which target a different topic per infographic. So we've done ones on anxiety, ones on choking and vomiting, and these are shared with all of the PWS patient groups globally. So the registry is designed to be its own independent project, and this is designed to be a community tool. So these infographics come out to international Prader-Willi syndrome patient groups all over the world to use for their informational materials, and they're used in FPWR's blogs, et cetera, on our website. We do have a booth here at the conference as well if you'd like more information. So what I wanted to do this year was talk about all of the really exciting collaborations and projects that are now starting to be done through the registry. Now that there's sort of critical mass in terms of participants and data, and industry and clinicians and researchers are recognizing what a valuable tool this is, there's a lot of exciting collaborations that are coming out of that. Tapping into what Natalie was saying, the registry is being used to develop new endpoints for clinical trials. So the caregiver burden project that Natalie mentioned that will be talked about more, that survey was run through the registry. It was a survey that had a lot of questions asking about quality of life for caregivers and quantitatively measures impact on quality of life of caregivers. The PADQ, the PWS Anxiety and Distress Questionnaire that Leva will be talking about, that was just beta tested through the registry. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that probably a lot of people in this room participated in that. So thank you all for those of you who participated in that. And they are designing that to be one of the endpoints in their upcoming clinical trial that they will be speaking about tomorrow. The other way that the registry is being used is to understand and develop standards of care in PWS. There was a poster yesterday from an undergraduate intern who's working at Soleno Therapeutics. We're always excited when there's young, new scientists who are coming into the field. That was an initial analysis of all of the medications and treatments and supplements information that's in the registry. And that's sort of the first time that there's been a comprehensive analysis of that information. And there's another group that is working on a paper where they are trying to understand the incidence of individuals with PWS that are undergoing total hip and knee arthroplasty, with the goal of trying to understand trying to develop recommendations that orthopedics should be using to help guide families as to whether or not help guide families in making the decision as to whether or not to pursue hip or knee replacements. And so that's some of the examples of helping guide standards of care. And then advancing just the overall understanding of natural history of PWS in terms of expanding on the registry. The big project that we're launching that you'll hear about tomorrow, and there's a booth out, is the Path for PWS project in collaboration with ZAFGen, and that is launching. I can't believe it. We've been working on that for months. So to tell you a little bit more about that, that is designed to bolster a lot of the surveys that are already in the registry, and several surveys were added to the registry with respect to that project, specifically in serious medical events and thrombotic risk, trying to understand more about what are the serious medical events, hospitalizations, things along those lines that families are experiencing. And you'll hear a lot more about this tomorrow. And then, like I mentioned, the collaborative project with Levo that you'll hear about tomorrow as well. So I would encourage all of you who have not enrolled in the registry, I task you with enrolling. If you've enrolled and haven't taken a survey, I challenge you to take a survey before the end of October. If you've taken a couple surveys, take a couple more before the end of October. If you finished everything a couple years ago and you haven't been back in, come back in and update your surveys before the end of October. I challenge all of you to participate. This is something that families can actively do to help contribute to the mission of this conference. And with that, I'll close.
Okay, Teresa's going to come back up and talk a little bit about our clinical care program. Teresa?
So I'm just going to be very quick about this and talk a little bit about one of the other directed programs, which is clinical care. And this is really directed at, we love to, develop, believe me, I love gene therapy. I would love to develop a gene therapy for PWS, and we're working on that, but that's not something that's going to happen real soon. So in the meantime, we want to make sure that all of the drugs and therapies that are out there now are being optimally used for our kids and adults with PWS. And that's really the focus of this program. Again, this is all the way down at the end of the line using tools that we already have available on the market. So the goal is to alleviate PWS symptoms in the near term, and we want to use existing medicines and treatments and determine how they can be optimally used for individuals living with PWS. And so what we've done is gotten the input of a lot of our expert clinicians on, what are the treatments that are out there. We've gotten input from families. What are the symptoms that are bothering you the most today? And we've kind of merged those together into a long list of symptoms and possible treatments. So we developed our list of treatments for each of, or developed our list of symptoms for each of those symptoms, developed what are some possible treatments, what do we know and not know, got some input from a number of clinicians who devoted a lot of time to this, so we really appreciate their input, and then put together a panel of parents with across the different age groups to ask, like, what are the things that are most important to you. So we're in the middle of this process right now. This is our long list of possible projects that we could fund through this program. For example, right, our kids have a lot of GI problems. Some people use Miralax, some people use probiotics, some people use diet. So we can, develop a clinical trial that people do at home, essentially, but structure it so that we get information that's useful to the entire community. And another issue, as an example, is there's some indication that our kids have hypoglycemia, that their blood sugar may go down really low, sort of in a way that could do some damage as they're little. And so really, we don't really have a good understanding of that, but there are some things that we could do to get a better understanding of that. And the solution is really simple. It's, making sure that the child is getting enough food at regular intervals, but we don't really have a good handle on what the level of the problem is. So we're at the point of having our long list, and now we're going back to prioritize using the input from the clinicians and the families as well. We do have a couple of things that we've already started in this program. One is the mindfulness intervention that Lauren mentioned. Helping our young adults and adults with PWS learn to manage their emotions a little bit better. Another thing that's really important across the community is growth hormone for adults with PWS. So those of us with older kids know that as soon as your child's done growing or as soon as they hit the magical age of 18, the insurance company does not want to pay for growth hormone any longer. There's a lot of data that says that it benefits adults with PWS. It's better for body composition, it's better for stamina, it's better for cognitive flexibility. But in order for our kids to actually have access to that, we need to have convincing data to share with the insurance company. So a major focus of this program is getting that definitive clinical trial that we hope will allow us to more easily access for all of our adults with PWS. So I think... Oh, I did want to mention, so that's the end of that. I did want to mention before we stepped away that, our research team is really doing a lot as far as leadership in the rare disease community that I think is important to share. So we're members, FPWR is a member of the Clinical Trial Transformation Initiative, which is an FDA academic patient group collaboration to make clinical trials more efficient and better quality, and we've been involved in some of those projects. I've been appointed to the the Patient Engagement Collaborative at the FDA, which is a panel of about 16 advocates who are working with the FDA so that we can better incorporate the patient perspective into drug development, and that's a 3-year appointment. They just started that. It's a big initiative at the FDA. Natalie's going to China in a month or two to present over there at a Shanghai International Conference. I was able to present at the NIH at Rare Disease Day. So, and Jessica will be going next week, I think, to the in 5 days to the NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders. They run our registry and 20 other registries, and we have a lot, our registry is far ahead of many other registries, so she'll be sharing the expertise that we've developed in our registry with others in the rare disease community so their registries can be better. So, so we're busy, and these opportunities are great for us, but they're also great for our community. It raises the profile of PWS. It allows us to engage with the leaders in the field and sort of keep PWS at the front of their mind, which I think is great. So, turn back over to you.
No, we're not there yet. Susan, can you help me here? Thank you. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Let's see, where are we? Right here.
My wrap.
Right there. Oh, you really escaped out of it.
There we go. So it's clear that there's a lot going on. These folks are busy doing a lot of things, trying to take work and translate it into things that is going to benefit your loved ones. So what I wanted to try and do now was sort of consolidate this and share it with you from a perspective of, you're investing in us, what are we returning back to you? And so what I did was I tried to take this and say, clearly there's hope for the future. Teresa touched on that in terms of genetic solutions, gene replacement, gene activation. But where are we now? So the organization's been in business since 2004. We've been funding grants since 2004. But I think what's real important here when you look at this, so 2004 to 2017, $10.3 million. When you add in this year, close to $12 million. But 75% of those dollars have been raised in the last 5 years. And when you look at the time that it takes to take a bright idea in a lab and bring it to a new therapy to market, generally the time frame is 15 to 20 years. And so the challenge that we had as an organization with you trusting us and investing in us is, how can we bring solutions to bear that can help your loved ones now? So 15 years ago, before the organization existed, the body of knowledge around PWS was very small. Today, the only FDA-approved drug is growth hormone for PWS. No other approved drug exists currently from the FDA. But by you investing in us and us in turn, having these people pick and select promising programs, we've been able to build that body of knowledge and identify some early work that could potentially bring solutions to bear now. So ghrelin has been talked about, and tomorrow, during the clinical trials presentation, you'll hear one of the companies that has a product that targets ghrelin to try and suppress appetite. Similarly, oxytocin has been talked about for a number of years, but the organization has been funding research in that area since around 2009. Levo will be talking tomorrow and soon to be launching a phase 3 clinical trial with a product called carbetocin. It's an analog of oxytocin. Diazoxide, in 2012, a researcher came to us and said, we think this product that's been around for a really long time might have efficacy in PWS. So we funded the research, did the early work necessary to try and determine whether or not that was in fact true. And now, fast forward, 2018, Soleno tomorrow will be presenting their phase 3 clinical trial in diazoxide with work that we funded early on. Lauren touched a little bit about vagus nerve stimulation, and I think most poignantly in terms of sort of hope for the future, we've been funding work in gene activation and gene replacement for quite a long time. The other piece of this that's important, what we've done here by funding this early work, it's allowed for additional investment, both from the NIH, to advance these trials or studies along. So probably by about next June, there'll be 10 companies, we believe, with active clinical trials in PWS. Nearly all of these compounds will address hyperphagia. Many will address hyperphagia and behavior. And, you know, as Natalie touched on, all of these companies are working with us in our clinical trials consortium. And Natalie touched on what's involved in that. And the other part of it is the other organizations that are involved in this area, PWSA, the International PWS Organization, Prader-Willi France is also involved in this consortium. So tomorrow you'll hear about 5 clinical trials that are happening. So if you think about that 5-year time frame where we really increase our investment, in 2018 we'll have, tomorrow you'll hear about 5 active clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And we really haven't touched on that, but usually you'll hear about 4 aspects of trials. Preclinical work, which oftentimes is either testing on an animal or testing in a petri dish, if you will, in terms of whether or not something might work. In a phase 1 trial, often what's simply occurring is we have a good idea, we think it might have efficacy, and we're going to test it. And oftentimes, really what's being tested in the phase 1 trial is toxicity. They'll escalate doses and they'll see what kind of tolerance can occur or not occur in human. And that's all, it's not really necessarily looking for a response. In phase 2, we'll look for a response, and in phase 3, ultimately, we'll be looking for a full response to move those things forward. One of the things that's key here is we're dealing with a small population. There are a number of trials going on. I'd encourage all of you to come and listen to that presentation tomorrow, and then if you think it might be right for you to go home and talk to your physician about whether or not participation in a trial like that might be appropriate for your loved one. So I talked about these 2 programs in gene activation and gene replacement. 2007, FPWR began funding Dr. Zhang's lab, and we funded him in 2011, 2012, 14, and 16. Just recently, Levo has now gone to Duke and has entered into an agreement with them and is investing $3 million, to try and move that, to do the preclinical work, to see if there might be applicability to begin in a human trial. Similarly, Levo has also gone to the University of Connecticut to Dr. Lalonde, Dr. Chamberlain's lab, and made an investment there. I don't know the exact amount of that investment, to do exactly the same thing. And a while back, they had gone to Dr. Leibel's lab at Columbia to see if we could move PC1 along. So there's other testing going on in oxytocin and other analogs at the University of Florida, Montefiore Medical Center, who's here today as well. And those things have been funded by us, by the FDA, and by PWSA. In the area of ghrelin, the organization began funding research there as far back as I could tell and go and look at the details in 2005 and had built a body of knowledge around that. And now we have some trials that are taking place that are targeting the suppression of ghrelin because we know it's elevated in individuals with PWS. So that's sort of a little history, and I think what's important here is, you know, what's next. And the way I always look at this is you're investing in us and trusting us to invest in the right places. And what I'm trying to share with you is sort of what we've been able to return in a very, very short period of time. This was touched on a little bit, but we've just approved a grant to try and develop a non-human primate model with PWS, and that research will be moving forward. Probably in the first quarter of next year, we'll bring together a group of leading geneticists to try and look at and build a plan that focused specifically in the area of genetics and PWS to see if we can't move some of these projects forward quicker. Earlier today, the Shaofiang groups, which is a similar situation with chromosome 15, met this morning and began to map out a plan on how we're going to approach and build on that. Teresa touched on the growth hormone study that we're looking to launch in conjunction and support with a major manufacturer. Harmony Biosciences has been in discussions with us about potentially launching a clinical trial early next year with the drug pitolisant. This is something that many of you probably might have heard of, but to date, there is not an indication for pitolisant in PWS. It's prescribed off-label. What we want to do in partnership with Harmony is do a clinical trial that's approved by the FDA and find out and determine through that trial when it's appropriate to use it, when it's not appropriate to use it, what's the right age of use, what's the right dosage, et cetera. That can only be done in a clinical trial. The other area that we want to try and look at is there applicability with some already approved psychotropic drugs that can help with some of the things that are occurring with your loved ones in the area of behavior control. And ultimately, what we want to try and find is real, strong, solid genetic help for your loved ones to really improve their lives. That's a longer-term strategy. That's why we need a plan and need to try and lead in that regard. But as I mentioned to you when I first started, we're all here. We've covered a lot of data right now, a lot of information right now, and I'm sure that you probably have a lot of questions. We're all here over the weekend. Please approach us and ask specific questions that you might have. I strongly encourage you to hear the clinical trial stuff tomorrow and see if participating is right for your loved ones. And I think most importantly is a formula for success here is really pretty plain. We need people like yourselves investing in us. We need to invest in the science. We need to advance that continuum of knowledge and bring new therapies to market. That's time and money. It's really that simple. So I'd ask you to continue to support us, continue to believe in what we're trying to bring and deliver to you, and realize that our goal here is it's really fully understanding the sense of urgency that you all have. You need something now. It's been almost 15 plus years that growth hormone was approved. There hasn't been anything else that's been approved for PWS. We need new therapies now. But at the same time, we want to put forward and have that hope for the future. So with that, I really encourage you to engage in all the different sessions at the conference. Ask a lot of questions, other folks, your peers that are here in the room, us, and really enjoy the conference. So I'll open it up to questions now, if anybody has any. Are there any questions? Yes.
It's not a question, actually, it's a comment. I'm Carolyn Forty, and I'm the CEO for that relic company that John referred to. And I just want to commend you for the tremendous work that you guys are doing. Both the foundation and all of you together. Because without you, a lot of this would not be possible.
Thank you.
When we decided to actually study our compound in PWS, thank you. My first reflex was actually to look to see if there was a research foundation, because when I started doing research, drug development, I was in the HIV field, and so I worked very closely with patient groups and patient associations to basically develop the best protocols for patients. And so that was my first reflex, because I didn't know much about Prader-Willi syndrome, but I knew enough that I wanted our compound to be studied in that indication, and I convinced our board of directors to do that. And I can just tell you that we've had tremendous support from the foundation. We've been able to use the hyperphagia questionnaire that's been developed in collaboration with you. And so I just want to thank you, and I just want to maybe comfort patient, all of you parents that are here, you're in good hands with the foundation. Thank you.
Are there other questions? Yes.
Yeah, you spoke to the growth hormone not being indicated for use with adults with Prader-Willi syndrome. Is that internationally, or is that solely in the United States?
That's internationally, yeah. And the study that we're developing is an international study. Oh, sorry, the question was about growth hormone use in adults, whether it's indicated internationally for individuals with PWS, and the answer is no. My understanding is that, in many countries it's a real problem when the kids hit adulthood, and that's why the study that we're developing is an international study, because we hope it'll help here in the U.S., but also in Europe as far as gaining access. Yeah.
And just to add to that, just so you know, it's not approved for pediatrics in Canada.
No, we're Canadian.
Yeah. Yeah. Other questions?
What percentage of PWS families have filled out questionnaires on the registry?
There are 1,600 enrollees in the global PWS registry so far, so it's a good population, but that is probably 10% of the U.S. population, so we can do a lot better. And the registry is international, so the U.S. has about 75%, but we also, yay to our Canadian friends, about 10% from Canada, and then all over Europe. So it's good compared to many rare disorders, but I feel like we can do a lot better. Jessica does too.
No, I mean, echoing what Teresa said, when I go to these, NORD and to other registry type conferences and talk with people who are engaged in registries, everybody's blown away by the number of people that are in a registry. In terms of the field, our statistics are huge, but for us, we're not satisfied. And I think a lot of that also has to do with making sure that it's not just numbers, it's the full capture of the spectrum of PWS. So we recognize that right now, most of the people that are in the registry, majority of the people in the registry, are people that are connected through social media, because that's the easiest people to reach. And so we are working to collaborate with clinics, group homes, to get more representation of adults, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, people who are doing well, people who are not doing so well, to make sure that we're really getting a full spectrum. I talk about it, if you've heard me before, about it being a quilt. Every person's story is a patch of the quilt. And it doesn't matter if your story sounds like it's like everybody else's, or I'll hear people say, well, my story is completely different, so you don't need my story. That's the story we need. We need the ones, especially that where you really feel like you're in a unique situation.
So could I just have one more question, perhaps?
Is any part of the registry interactive where, we can't see anybody's personal information, but we can see stats and, comments and questions that other people post?
So there's a couple things I'll say. So number one is that, like I mentioned, when you complete a survey, you can see the aggregate data for each question in that survey. So if you're really interested in nutritional phase or diet, take that survey and you'll be able to see how many other people tried a ketogenic diet. The integrated analytics in terms of breaking things down where you're, data by multiple questions, ketogenic diet by subtype, that's not available, that's not possible for participants. But the other side of it is that there is a Facebook page that's specifically dedicated just to the registry. It's not FPWR, it's not PWSH, or IPSO, it's a registry Facebook page. So if you're not on there, you can go on there, and that's a great place to ask questions, because we can pull the data, and questions like that help drive the infographics that we're releasing. So even though you may not be able to dial down into complex data analytics, you can help drive what type of analytics you want us to be pulling so that we're getting that information back to you. The goal is to get the information back to the community.
Real quick comment about that. I just think we're so busy as parents that more frequent reminders, I know for me, would be beneficial, just because I really want to be doing them, but I totally just kind of space on them. So
So we're just this week launching the Path for PWS study, which will be it's for kids 5 and up. So I'm not neglecting to the 0 to 4-year-olds. We want you in there too. But the nice thing about the PATH study is it's got a little incentive, for everyone to sit down and fill out all the surveys. I know it's I want to do it, but I don't have the time, right? So there's a $100 gift certificate from Amazon if you complete.
And a new hire dedicated to.
Yeah, and we have a new person, Lisa, who's going to be helping. So if you need direct help, if you have questions, we have additional resources to help you get through that information as well. So you should see, and we'll start this weekend sort of with a big push to get back into the registry, fill out the new surveys associated with the PATH study, as well as update your old survey. So yes, we will be pushing you gently.
So the amount of work that these individuals do is truly amazing. Can we give them a big round of applause? Thank you so much for doing that for us.